Man, this has been on the back burner for a long time. I can't believe I didn't talk about this issue. Nintendo censors a hentai game on Switch. Is Nintendo caving to the SJWs? Is Nintendo becoming woke? Am I gonna have to like super chat RGE so he talks about this? Like, am I gonna have to like start boycotting Nintendo? No, of course not. Like, what actually happened is the same thing that's been happening I think every year for like the past while. That like some no-name indie developer, right? Some no-name YouTuber reports that Nintendo is censoring some game from some etchy developer to get attention and clicks, right? Because this has been proven to happen a couple of times where these indie scenes who make like etchy content, fan servicey, like sexual, like hentai stuff, will release statements saying that like, oh, we're having problems getting a release on the Switch eShop because Nintendo doesn't like the product we're putting out, and that gets like game journalists excited, that gets YouTubers excited, like, oh man, Nintendo's up to their old tricks. They're censoring content. They're censoring things. And then what happens is that this game that nobody cares about comes out with no issues, right? Like they keep doing this, right? Because it is legit a stereotype that the gaming industry keeps wanting to perpetuate, that Nintendo is particularly censorship happy. Even in this era where we're having more problems with third parties and Sony being going back and censoring, right? Like Nintendo has never gone back and like changed something like the Telltale devs did with Sam and Max, for example, or like the Skullgirls people, or like GTA censored some Troon jokes. Like there's all these examples of all these developers that have censored things, but really nothing from Nintendo. Like anybody like trying to claim Nintendo is behind censoring like these games like clearly doesn't know anything about the company. Like I've seen people like try to say Xenoblade Chronicles 3 was censored, right? Like, oh, look at those outfits. Now, meanwhile, you have like the ending, you have like plenty of alternative costumes. Like it's such like a ridiculous thing, right? It's such a ridiculous narrative that's like unfortunately been pushed to the forefront in the agenda against Nintendo. Not so much as it was in like the 2015, 2016 period, but like it's still absolutely there, right? The narrative is still being pushed like among certain groups of people that like Nintendo is censoring your video games. And it's such like a complete joke. It's so out of touch with reality that it's really difficult to take seriously. Like especially when these kind of stories come up, right? Because what happened with this particular situation is that some YouTuber claimed to have received an anonymous tip from a game developer working on like some hentai game that like the game was getting censored on Switch, right? Like it was some obviously nonsense thing, right? It's no different than like RGT85 or the Review Tech USA releasing statements that like, oh, Switch 2 news has just dropped when like really it's a nothing burger, right? It's the same kind of thing. Like some YouTuber made a statement that Nintendo was going to censor a game, and of course, Kotaku and Action reports on it. Of course, the usual suspects report on it. Of course, these people try pushing the narrative that Nintendo is on the verge of becoming what it used to be, the most censorship happy company in the industry. And no, that it wasn't true at all, right? Completely just not true at all. So, with that in mind, I do think this needs to be a strategy for no-name indie hentai devs going forward. Like, this needs to be like addressed more often. That this is a thing that happens, right? That this is a thing that people are talking about, right? That this is a narrative that's being constantly pushed among this group of people, right? That this is a narrative, that it is a real conspiracy, where like these YouTubers and these hentai developers are partnering up to illicitly get attention by claiming Nintendo is doing something that they aren't. They are taking advantage of Nintendo's ill-deserved reputation of censorship of sexual content to promote their games, to get people talking about them, to get people supporting them, and then just releasing games anyway. Ooh, Nintendo changed their minds because of your actions. Thank you, guys. When in reality, there was never really any threat of not getting an uncensored release on Nintendo platforms, right? Like, that is just, it's just pathetic. It's sleazy, it's ridiculous, and it just really puts Nintendo in a bad light. And I'm very tired of seeing this kind of thing happen, play out over and over and over again. And I hope that more people start speaking out against that. I hope it becomes more commonly accepted that these developers don't respect Nintendo. They don't respect the fans. They don't actually respect like they don't actually stand for any causes that people would want to support. They're not base. They're not red pill. They don't want to um, they don't want to protect your freedom of speech. They don't want to respect. They don't want to protect their freedom of expression. They're just taking advantage of you and your naivete, right? They are taking advantage of your contempt and hatred for the SJWs, for the woke mob, to just try and get some scant amount of attention for pulling some cheap publicity stunt like this, right? It is positively absurd how often I've seen this happen. And this time, this does seem to be a light that I addressed this. I called this out the moment it happened. I saw other people call it out the moment it happened. And by the looks of it, this time, this developer has gone back into hiding with their tail between their legs, right? Because they don't. Nintendo fans are sick of hearing about these hentai games. I'm sick of hearing people accuse Nintendo of censorship. And now it feels like there's more and more people there's more and more backlash to this kind of thing, right? There are more and more people hearing these kind of stories and telling themselves, so what, right? I don't care about what you have to say, right? Like, I am sick of your narrative. I am sick of your agenda. I am sick of your hentai. Now get out of my face and just do whatever, right? Just don't accuse Nintendo of doing something to you ever again.